I think if you have a look at the discussion, the question then is, if we're not going to pay KV to somebody else, who else is going to pay for it? And we're also going to say, well, not us. So how's it going to happen? So I think the big challenge really comes down to making sure that we do need to find the route, and we do need to find a way forward that we can actually meet each other. So our objective here really today is to reduce the electricity tariff. And we want to be able to produce competitive products here in Tshwane. And we want to make sure that we join the city of Tshwane to our cause and build good business rather than what we have today, where it's not going to take us to meet our objectives. So competitiveness of locally made products requires competitively priced resources and utilities. And I think this is a very important discussion whilst we're in this room today and we're considering electricity tariffs. We are all worried about the fact is that we are going backwards as an economy, as a country. We're going backwards in terms of our employment rates. We are going backwards in terms of the way that we're coming up with innovative solutions. This has to stop, ladies and gentlemen. And the first place to deal with it is right in your hometown. And so here in the discussion around Tshwane, obviously it becomes a real investment not only into our businesses, but into our own society and the societies that will follow in our children. The next thing that's very important is that if we want to actually grow the economy, to grow the users of electricity so that we can afford these rates, what's going to happen is we need to draw investment into the economy. If we're going to charge a fortune relative to other municipalities for our KV rate, we are not going to draw investment into our city. It is much cheaper to go to other cities. The benchmark that I've got essentially is against a coastal environment. We're very focused on automotive here. So using Port Elizabeth as an example, they are 20% cheaper than us on a kilowatt hour charge. How do we deal with that? If we want to expand our manufacturing and job creation, we have to consider this not only as a national imperative, but your imperative, you personally. What are we going to do about it? How do we deal with it? And these answers, very often I see blank faces as we engage with parties, and we do not have a personal buy-in. But let me tell you, everybody in this room has a personal buy-in to job creation. And if we're going to just let this pass, our kids will be on the street for generations to come. So clusters are a value-add proposal for municipalities, and therefore we are relevant in this space. So we are very concerned about our economy. Unjustified increases, and I think we've had a lot of debates during the course of this morning, but I think that, Madam Chair, to you, is that we really have a responsibility to be accountable for that we manage. And that means that if we pass anything that comes through to us, we need to make sure that it is correct and that at the end of the day, whatever we're going to do, the increases are sustainable. Industry cannot afford cost leakage. That means it's all well and good that you've got rising costs and you're just passing it on to the consumers and so forth. Guys, you live in a dream world. If we're going to do that, we're going to lose jobs hand over foot. The only way we can move forward is that you have to stay within your benchmarks. And benchmarks that you got, let me tell you, are wrong. So as a result of it, in these environments, we have to work out how we deal with the costs and how we make sure that we can be competitive and that our businesses and our environment can be competitive. As an industry of municipalities, Tshwane is not competitive. So if we pass on spiraling tariff increases, we will not resolve our problems. We're just going to cause more for tomorrow. We have to deal with those today. And we have to ensure that the inflated tariffs are not allowed to choke our businesses and reduce our electrical usage. It didn't really get discussed in much detail here this morning, but we all know that Eskom has been a problem. The challenge Eskom sits with is that they've got more than enough generation capability Now, I asked the question, not of this meeting, but just so that you have it in the back of your mind, is that we're not thinking about structured cost. Why on earth are we investing in more generation capacity when we already have enough? Why don't we fix what we've got and keep going? So the effects of the electricity tariff increase for 2019-20 is going to cause a whole lot of different outcomes. Most essentially, undue pressure on already constrained manufacturing. Ladies and gentlemen, many of our factories are running at 30% utility of their capacity. The only idea what that means is we've got huge costs that we're trying to carry with no work. It doesn't take much to push these factories over the brink that they close. That means that that capacity is gone. To reinvest into that capacity is going to be almost too much. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not attracting investors, so why would anybody want to do that? We're also going to create ongoing stress on the local economy as we see ongoing costs related to shrinkages in manufacturing and shrinkages in jobs. It is not logical to just keep pushing costs through. It's more logical to reverse the trend and increase your job creation, increase your electricity usage, and increase revenues. And this is a team effort. I cannot say it more, but we as a team in this room here today have got a task. So when we start looking at the administrative side of things, we provided a letter to Nersa in response to the 2019 benchmark tariff guidelines. Madam Chair, Nersa takes a portion of the blame in this whole scenario. We are grateful to you for the stance you've taken here today, and we are actually quite delighted by the focus on the EPP and the focus on getting details behind what the costs are that actually are driving these increases. Based on the information that we had a couple of months ago, and I think it still stands, and that is that there is a disregard of the legislative framework and even the Nersa duties related to electricity. Municipal tariffs at levels that constrain and stifle growth. It's totally contra to whatever we're trying to do if we're talking about development and growth. I don't think that we have much leadership to understand what that actually means, but we do have to do something, and we can lead it from this room. Municipalities are charging more than Eskom, where Eskom is providing the same service. How can that be? It's all well and good if it's an efficient service, perhaps, but not astronomical costs, as you will soon see. We know from what's been said this morning is municipal costs are not efficient, especially in the distribution, and we've heard about how some of it's falling over as a result of lack of maintenance and so forth. And the vastly differing tariffs that are levied for the same services by different municipalities is discriminatory and irrational. It is going to chase business away from us. It's going to chase us into a situation where we're going to be really scrambling to support ourselves based off services. We submit, in our humble opinion, that the municipal tariffs as they stand are unlawfully cross-subsidizing certain customer categories, and that the calculations that should have been done in terms of customer category, in terms of actual cost per category, have not been submitted properly, and we thank you for the discussion this morning, and we hope that that will be rectified. And we object and oppose the usage of electricity tariffs as a mechanism to cross-subsidize inefficiencies and other unrelated activities. So, as a focus on the city of Tshwane, we do not believe has actively communicated or conducted a public participation process with industrial users. We do not have enough transparency on information that's being shared with us. We do not have the choice of options when we are about to embark on changes in the metering related to our members. We don't know what the next steps are in terms of what you want to do. If this is a teamwork, this is a home goal because you have no opposition. There is nobody else at the table. So Tshwane is not complying with the regulations. And we've talked this morning about the cost of supply studies. We've talked about the efficiency levels and so forth. But I think what's really missing here is that there's a very specific requirement, if one goes to EPP, that we are looking at cost per category and that we are understanding exactly what the cost per category means, and that we are not cross-subsidizing across category, and that there's a proof of efficiency, and that in the electricity account for the Tshwane municipality, there's audited financials. At this point in time, I'm not sure if that's been submitted, but I would really hope that that is part of what the package is that you're going to have received. So, Tshwane, I was going to say, is being enabled by Nersa. However, I'm glad to say after this morning's discussion, I don't think that they are being enabled by Nersa. But I do think that we are writing something which is very, very important, and that is that we get a balance. There's no way we can have one-sidedness in this market. There's no ways that we can just take on any more space of what people want to push into our environment. We need transparency. And if we are going to live with these poor efficiencies and so forth, it's going to lead to a number of outcomes that we don't want. It's going to mean that the ring-fenced accounts that we're supposed to keep will not be there. It's going to lead to the fact that there's going to be uncertainty on what electricity income is actually being used for. It's going to mean that there's unlawful cross-subsidization between customer categories, that customers pay for inefficiency and customers pay for inefficiencies in electricity distribution. I think somebody touched on this morning. And that there's going to be excessive markup on tariffs. There's no grounds to justify why industrialists, in particular in this discussion, are being mistreated, and why are we taxing them in order to try and pay for things that we don't necessarily want or need. So let me provide you an example. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the rate as it stands for 11 kV industrial rate. If we do a rough calculation, we'll find that the Eskom rate charged to Tshwane is approximately, at maximum, about 70 Rand per kV. But yet, the Tshwane cost, I must just note that there's an error there, it should be 192.68, but the Tshwane cost to industry is 192.68. This is a massive difference. It's excessively high. And as I mentioned earlier, the question must arise as whether we're being taxed illegally for inefficiencies, other customer categories, other municipal departments, and maybe just a straightforward other. The amount of money difference between what is being charged to Tshwane and to the users is differing by about 270%. How do we account for this? This is irrational, it's unlawful, and it's constraining industry. It's a home goal, folks. This is shooting yourself in the foot. This is actually putting people on the street. And you know, we talked earlier that people on the street can't afford the tariffs that you're proposing anyway. So what are we going to do? So our recommendations are quite simple. As it stands, any changes are going to cause that you're going to have to have constructional discussions with us. In terms of the actual evaluations and so forth, we think that there's a path forward that Nersa's benchmark increases of 13.07% will result, because of the current practices, in the application of unlawful tariffs. Until such time as they've dealt with all of the information that's required to support these increases. Let me tell you the baseline as we look at the kV rate and the kilowatt hour rate is not based on the 13.07. Over the years there's been a creep. Our factories, difference between Eskom and Tshwane, are over 40%. That is not sustainable. You've seen earlier that massive increase that I showed you in the working example just on kV. So we're suggesting that the Nersa solution is simply to freeze the Tshwane electricity tariff at 2018-19 levels until the tariffs are proven to be compliant with the regulations. We heard earlier that perhaps they can afford it at this point in time, so maybe that's good news for us. But I think the more important thing here is there's a much greater need for us to work with each other and to collaborate between industry, the city of Tshwane, other stakeholders, to ensure that we develop a framework for sustainable growth and development, and that's underpinned by an efficient and secure electricity supply. I'm willing to bet that we all want the same thing, but we need to get onto the same page. And I suggest, Madam Chair, the way that Nersa evaluates and keeps the municipality in check is a good place to start. The rules have been written. There's ways and means to actually deviate if we want to negotiate those changes, but let's not do them ad hoc without actually letting anyone else know. Let's do them together if there's need for it. We do not see a need at this point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jardine, for the presentation as well as the recommendations. And I assume Mr. Smanda might have a clarity question, especially on the recommendations, just to understand exactly bullet point 1, right, bullet point 2, what exactly is being suggested here. Maybe if I may clarify that, are you suggesting that with the tariffs that were approved last year by Nersa, that Nersa perhaps should then consider adding the 13% that is in the guidelines approved this year?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. No, we're not.
You did, yeah, okay.
We're not accepting that at this point in time. And the recommendation, in actual fact, I made a different recommendation, but our members recommended otherwise. But certainly at this point in time, our main focus should be let's get it right. Make sure that we get the details that we are expecting to justify why we've got such massive differences between what's being paid by Eskom users versus what's being paid by municipal users.
Okay. So would it be fair, in your view, given the fact that Eskom has increased the tariffs and the municipality is has to cover those costs of the increased tariff that they are paying to Eskom, and are you of the view that they must still remain on the cost that was applicable last year and not do anything this year, irrespective? I just want to...
Madam Chair, I think that we are paying far too much for what is being provided to us at this point in time. And this is not an efficiency discussion, it's a simple cost discussion, and the cost gap is far greater than the increase. And what we need to do is we need to stop freeze the situation and deal with what the actual facts are. And the most important part that we want to see at the end of the day is we want to see if there's cost-reflective tariffs. And once we've actually got that, we can understand exactly where we're going to with them, and we'd be quite happy during the process to engage to a point where we can come up with answers, but within the framework of the existing legal framework.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jardine, for your input.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next presenter is Johan Engelbrecht from Voltano Metering. Jan, may you please raise your right hand? Thank you. Do you solemnly declare that the facts you are going to present before this panel today will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please state your full name and your designation at Voltano Metering.
I'm Johan Engelbrecht. I'm current CEO of Voltano Metering.
All right, thank you. You may proceed with your presentation, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just the advantage of getting to the podium at this time of day is that I think most of my presentation was done and went through already. Just to confirm what previous presenters said today, we'd like to look at it from our customers and also from our point of view, buying and selling electricity, what the actual figures are that they are presenting. Yeah, I took averages. You've seen this table in different formats already. What you would expect to pay if you use an X amount of units per month, whether it's 100 or 600, which is more or less the average. If there's no fixed fee for the end user, it's a 9% increase at 600 or 11 or 1400 less. If we look at a 56 rand fixed fee, it goes up to 18, 15%. And here also, as previously shows, 68% increase for the poorer communities. We're managing, for example, social housing projects in city centre where the average is 150 to 200 units per resident. By giving them a 40 to 68% average just doesn't make sense. We'll have riots on our hands should we implement this. Then, according to the tariffs that came out in the last letter, the reselling fee or basic fee, fixed fee then, for complexes or residential estates is still stated as 200 Rand. So they never reduced it to 56 Rand as they initially or afterwards said. So even there, in a complex, 700 low-cost units, 107% increase if they use 100 units. So that just confirms what we said earlier. Just a copy from the previous year's tariffs then to show from 537 to where we are at this moment. This has also been touched, where there's a 404% increase on LV connections. 80 to 150 amp is 10 townhouses. There's very few complexes actually that small. The average would be low voltage connections or even in 11 kV, which goes up 300%. Just a different view. What I did is give way to winter and summer tariffs. If you just add the two as they did in the council's letter, divided by 12, it gives a different average. So the average, if you give a proper weight of 3 months and 9 months, it comes to 156, which is a 10% increase, which is fair for electricity. Bringing the 56 fixed fee into account takes it up a little bit. There's actually coming down in summer, minus 3%, and on winter is a 7% increase. That's the connection, the potential income if you would sell electricity at the new rates to that complex. So immediately it shows that the 56 Rand is required, otherwise you're not going to make any profit, you're going to pay the council more. If there's 200, we're looking at 11% or 22% in the income increase compared to previous figures. And just from a reseller's point of view, let's put figures on the table for profit and loss then. In the previous tariff structure, with no levies, we would have made on a 50-unit complex 7,000 Rand profit per month. Bringing on the new tariffs in winter, we'll subsidize it. All we have to pay in 8,200 Rand. On winter months, 23,000 Rand. So as previously said, is that money going to come from the HOA or body corporate? Or is there some magic genie that's maybe going to give us the money somewhere? And that's it in a nutshell. I think it just confirms and states what other presenters said as well. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. What is your view then with having presented the impact of these proposed tariffs? What is your view with the proposed structures of the tariff?
Being where we are at the moment, I'd like to stand with some of the other presenters as well. It's a short term, we've got short time to implement new tariffs. I'll gladly, not gladly, but I'll accept the figure where decide on 13.07% and apply it to the 2018-2019 book right through on all the tariffs. That would be a short-term quick fix. But I think, personally, if I had a view, I would prefer Nersa to consider going to a national model instead of reviewing 278 tariff books every year. Why not consider doing one nationally and implement the same tariffs for the entire country? Thank you.
Yeah, so the city, in justifying these charges, said that the consumer is not going to feel the impact of the basic charges at the end of the day. Given your analysis, what is your view on that?
The proposed tariffs, there's no doubt that the consumer is going to feel the tariff increase. Just in winter, for example, you're already using 20% more electricity for additional heat. Now you're adding another up to 68% on that. People don't have that much disposable income anymore. I think most people currently live on the limit, or they live according to their income. And by applying a half-year increase of 60%, it's not going to work. The consumer on the floor is going to suffer. And that's unfortunate.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Engelbrecht, for your time and for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next presenter is Mr. Ted Blom from Mining and Energy Advisors. Go. Mr. Tshwane, if you could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly declare that the facts you are going to present before this panel today will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please state your full name and your designation at the Mining and Energy Advisors.
My name is Ted Blom, and I'm a partner at Mining and Energy Advisors.
Thank you. Please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, my presentation is going to be very brief. I'm not going to go into detail. I think all the other presenters have done a good job and have highlighted the inequities built into the current application. I'm going to share with you the benefit of an overall view as to the impact of the tariff increases. Today we saw the symptoms of what's going on in this country, but there's some root causes, and that starts at Eskom. I know this is an Eskom meeting, but the fact of the matter is what Eskom does feeds into what we saw today. If I may preface myself, as I sometimes do, the fact of the matter is virtually all the municipalities and Eskom are remiss in supplying cost of supply studies. And I really think and I'm so glad to see a new broom at Nersa applying the regulations a bit more robustly than what has been in the past 10 years. In fact, the maxim should be no cost of supply study or inadequate application, no increase, full stop. Because that's the way we get treated. If we don't pay, we get cut off. And what's good for the goose is good for the gander. The second thing, Madam Chair, is that if Eskom do supply the cost of supply studies, we'll see that their gross margin is more than 100%. The third thing is that they charge us premiums in winter. In actual fact, Eskom's own declarations are that it's cheaper for them to supply electricity in winter because the cooling factors are far better in their cooling towns. So they get better efficiency in winter. So in actual fact, the price of electricity in winter, if you base it on purely on cost of supply, should be actually cheaper than in summer. So this whole notion of winter premiums is part of the scam and the corruption at Eskom, and it's now becoming embedded. Fourthly, this whole thing about inclined block tariffs. Madam Chair, I did a presentation to the Competition Commission about 2 years ago, of which Nersa is part and parcel of that process to the extent that it involves electricity, if I have my understanding of the regulations correctly. And as far as I'm concerned, the whole inclined block tariff system is uncompetitive and is illegal. The fact of the matter is that it's random. Everybody plays around with them, the municipalities, everybody plays around with them. On top of that, there's this whole regime of alternative costs that have been hit. We saw in Cape Town, they're now doing surcharges on properties because the people have installed solar or whatever, and they're reducing their consumption. Municipality for municipality for municipality are playing the same game, as we saw today in Tshwane. They're now messing around. It's a game of cat and mice. They chase you here, they chase you there, they try and drop you into one corner, etc., etc. And the worst of all is that with this whole fixed tariff structure that's now moving towards the bulk of your charges, means that even if you consume zero electricity from them, you will still be paying through your nose. And that is certainly not a user-pay type of environment, which the government espouses in its National Development Plan and in the SONA we heard a few weeks ago. Having got that off my chest, I want to just talk to a couple of slides. And I've called it SA tariffs the big lie, because that's what it is. It's a big lie. Briefly, I'll give a background, a quick example, the impact and outcome, and I hope to be finished in record time. The background is we have rising electricity tariffs, and effectively they've been way ahead of what you and I as consumers or businesses can afford. We've had one speaker compare the Tshwane regime versus the Port Elizabeth regime. In reality, if you're in the motor car business, you should be comparing yourself to the Singapore or the Beijing regime, because that's where you're going to lose your market to if the authorities don't get their acts together. Just the other thing is corruption's rife. We heard during the Eskom presentations, when I queried this very point, we heard the CFO say, well, the corruption's marginal, maybe 3 or 4 billion rand, which is anyway a hell of a number, but nevertheless, 3 or 4 billion rand. I read in the papers that the Hawks say they're investigating corruption of 139 billion rand. 139 billion rand. And yet we give Eskom increases. And yet we don't insist on the cost of supply. And yet we don't do a forensic audit of Eskom. And then my third point here in the background is that nationwide, at Eskom, at the municipalities, there is incomplete and poor administration. We're moving from what was a first world country, possibly, to the the bottom of the pile. And I don't know whether that is what we're happy to leave to our successors in time to come. I really think that if we want to get our act together, we're going to have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And that involves also much stricter regulatory enforcement, especially with administered prices, because administered prices should be administered to be below what the market would have given us. Not above, not 3 times or 4 times above what the market. Then let's rather open the market and let the market give us those services. I know for a fact that the price differential between Eskom, where most of the municipalities buy their power, and city power is probably in a ratio of 1 to 4. And city power has to import their coal. It's not mine-mouth operations. And if you go around and you do these cost studies, I mean, I've been very vocal about the fact that I believe the pre-corruption price of Eskom tariff should be below 40 cents, or below 50 cents a kilowatt hour. And I mean, that would change the whole regime in all the municipalities. Example, the base tariff, as far as I understand, I'm just taking estimates here, is roughly 115 a kilowatt hour from Eskom. But the impact of incline blocks, time of use, winter surcharges, line charges, admin charges, etc., means that there is probably nobody in this country. I'm going to put my head on the block. 95% of the people in this country are paying an average of more than 2 rand a kilowatt hour. And in some instances, it's even as high as 10 rand a kilowatt hour. And if you're paying all of these surcharges and you're not a consumer, it's infinity. And that's just ridiculous. We are killing the people we're supposed to be looking after. I'll take us to the objectives of the Act. And that is to ensure that the interests and needs of the present and future electricity customers and end users are safeguarded and met, having regard to the governance, efficiency, effectiveness, and long-term sustainability. Secondly, to promote competitiveness and customer and end user choice. Well, currently there's no end user choice, and when the end user tries to do some choice by implementing alternative strategies or energies, they're getting their heads chopped off anyway. So I don't think that this application from Tshwane actually meets the objects of the Act. Secondly, the tariff principle, one of them I'm just being selected, is that it must give end users proper information. And presenter after presenter after presenter after presenter today have highlighted that there is inadequate and incomplete. In fact, the regulator has said that there's inadequate documentation and information that's being provided. So on that basis, technically, this application is defective. And if it's defective, it needs to be redone and resubmitted. We can't patch over and penalize the innocent because the perpetrators can't do their job. For a job fault, they get paid millions of rands per year a year. Next, the impact. The impact on the effective cost of electricity is much higher than the published rates. And besides that, I mean, the efficiency of which the rates are being levied. I get queries, believe you me, day in and day out, week in and week out, and half of them I can't even attend to because the people can't afford to hire my services. They are down in the dumps. And the fact of the matter is they are being not just highly charged, but there's billing errors. Numerous. I get examples every week of billing errors. And I'm waiting for the Nersa process to open up again after they finish their building, so I can lodge these complaints and ask for hearings, so you can try and get some measure of justice for these, the poorest of the poor. I'm talking about a pensioner in Makassar in Cape Town who's got a bill last month of 200,000 rand. I said, my God, are you running a bakery? And they said, no, man, we're just pensioners. It's not, there's something wrong with the system. We see it in the newspapers once in a while, but I believe you me, it's far more endemic than what the newspapers are reporting, because they only report things that are new or sensationalist. They don't report repeating old news. We are now at the stage where the impact of all these higher tariffs that are unjustified and are just willy-nilly being added on is going to lead to a failed state. We're heading for that. We're heading for businesses going out, we're heading for an unemployment rate of over 40%, and if there's no turnaround in the situation, we are heading for a failed state where you and I and everybody else will be sitting on the streets and we won't have jobs, and a few lucky people in government jobs will have a salary. And that is surely not the dream of Mr. Mandela and all those who work with him. We're also ignoring the National Development Plan, which is the master plan. Why am I saying that? Because in the NDP they talk about beneficiating our fantastic minerals. Well, the only way you can beneficiate minerals is by applying electricity, one way or the other. Whether you wash it, whether you melt it, whether you smelt it, whatever you do, you need electricity. There's no ways in the world we are going to become competitive and be able to beneficiate our minerals and answer to the master plan if the prices of electricity increases by 2, 3, 4, 5 times the rate of inflation. It's just not sustainable. So our politicians are singing one song in Cape Town with the soda and all these nice speeches to the world audience. Back at home, they're bringing out the clubs and they're killing us. And that is not fair. I believe that this 500% corrupted price increases over the last 10 years is directly responsible for the negative GDP and unemployment. And we're going to see more results. We're going to see disinvestment. I've got cases of people wanting to actually develop their businesses. They can't get electricity, and if they do, the charges quoted by Eskom are through the roof for even connection charges. I mean, you'd think that Eskom would at least entice, and the municipalities would at least entice businesses to come into the cage before they start clubbing them. I think the outcome of all this, and my conclusion is, Madam Chair, that poor compliance with the ERA gives an incentive for corruption. We need to make sure that the ERA, the Electricity Regulation Act, is strictly complied with. Otherwise, I mean, what are we doing? We're wasting our time, and we're living in a wild jungle. Secondly, the economic impact of tariff increases and structures have been ignored. We've seen that. There's no cost of study submissions. We believe that the ERA is being ignored by most stakeholders. Why? I'm talking about all the municipalities that haven't delivered. Eskom hasn't delivered the cost of supply study. And all this inefficient running of the businesses. I believe there's end consumer discrimination and devastation. It's really, really not funny. Lastly, I think there's a great need for more effective policing, regulating and auditing of tariffs. And to that extent, I welcome the new broom at Nersa that is taking people to task. Madam, be brave. I am right behind you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blom, for the presentation. Mr. Spanda will have some questions of clarity, but I would like to first ask as to maybe the suggestions and your views with regards to the proposed tariff structures. There's a range of them. I think some of them, they did not touch on them, especially also the winning tariff that has been introduced. I'm not sure if it's for embedded generation and the others. So on that one, and I would like to get your views, even if you send additional views in the next 3-4 days, as we are waiting for Tshwane maybe to give us additional information, maybe we can take that opportunity. But I would like to get a sense here as to what do you think Nersa should do with these tariff structures that are introduced by the municipality. Given what we raised earlier on, even about compliance with the electricity pricing policy. Would like to get some understanding from your side there. As you also pointed out, that we need all of us to comply with the laws, the regulations, the policies, as well as the act. That's number one. The second one is, What do we do with the situation of Tshwane currently, if you were to make any suggestions to the regulator so that we can consider those, given the fact that they have the tariff of last year, and other stakeholders are saying, well, let them charge what we approved last year. Others are saying, oh well, perhaps you can base the increase on what was approved by Nersa last year and ignore any of these major changes that are contained in the application. Would like to hear your views there on those two aspects, Mr. Smith.
Okay.
If you could respond to those two.
Certainly. As far as the structure is concerned, Madam Chair, as I've indicated, or tried to indicate, the more we're moving from direct charges to indirect charges, in other words, all these additional fixed charges, the fact of the matter is we're moving further and further away from user pay. We're now making non-user pay. And I think that is not in the spirit of what I understand the President said in his SONA. I mean, we're trying to get the Gauteng ETOL people to pay, and I think the numbers should be reasonable. It shouldn't be these corrupted numbers. As I said with Eskom's debt, it shouldn't be 500 billion, it should be closer to 150 billion if you scrub out the corruption. In terms of what we should do with Tshwane, ma'am, if I may say that, you know what, we either apply the law, and we apply it strictly and properly, and because it's defective, we say go home and go and redo it. Until then, we get no increase. This thing of patching over and bending over to accommodate inefficiency and incompetence needs to stop, because we are pulling down the standards of Tshwane does it. Last time Cape Town did it. We condoned Cape Town because nobody took into account. Now Tshwane does it, and we're going to nearly condone it again. And all I think is we're doing is we're condoning inefficiency and incompleteness and incompetence. I think you're setting a new hurdle with the Eskom hearings, Madam Chair. I think you need to stick to that new level and not bring it down just to accommodate people who have not done it. They get paid lots of money. They really get paid lots of money. And they hire consultants and all sorts of people. And really, we as the consumer need to get value for money. We can't be penalized because of other people's incompetence. So I mind it sounds harsh, but Madam Chair, you're the one who set the standards. And I expect you to maintain those standards and even to take them higher. And I'll be right behind you all the way. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blom, for your views. All right, we have the last presenter of the day before we get a response from City of Tshwane, and that is Machalis Bronberg, Property Owners Association, MBPA. We have Mr. Alexander Medelberg to present.
Thank you, Madam.
Okay, you've taken the oath earlier on.
Yes.
It is still applicable to the new facts that you're going to present in terms of this association.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam. I'm standing in for the chairman of the Magaliesberg-Bromberg Property Owners Association. I happen also to be a member of the EXCO of the Property Owners Association. We are a group of property owners situated between the Magaliesberg and the Bromberg, and we endeavor to attempt to protect the environment in the rich areas of the Magaliesberg and the Bromberg area, and to look after the social and economic issues within this area of the residents. Madam Chair, I've already been here, so I am going to take us directly to the issues that are at the heart of the rural community, that is linked to the rural network. This basically covers the area of the O line, the Olympus area, the MK line, the Swalwelpoort south of the Bromberg, the ZW line, the Swalwelpoort north of the Bromberg, the SH line, the Tshwane line, the T line, that's the Tierpoort area, and the D line, that's the Donkerhoek and Mooiplaas areas. A huge issue for the consumers that are obtain their electricity from the rural network is the quality of supply received from the city of Tshwane. You will see from the slide that the source of this is a Section 79 Oversight Committee report from of the city itself, from the Utility Services Department, giving a report back on the quality of services. 61.1% of all failures takes longer than 7.5 hours to fix. Of the 90% of problems that should be fixed in less than 7.5 hours, only 38, make it 39%, are fixed within that time. Of the 60% that must be fixed within 33.5 hours, only 29% is fixed. And so for the 30% that should be fixed within 1.5 hours, only 20% is fixed. It is a major issue for people who try to live in this area. It is a major issue for small farmers in the area. And what is also taking place now is that light industry is moving east along some of the corridors there. This lack of quality of supply is a major issue and a constraint to the development of business opportunities there. The restructuring of the farm tariff has far-reaching effects on the affordability of electricity. We have done some calculations on the same basis as the previous calculations that I've shown here, but you will see, Madam Chair, that you will see here that of all the consumer groups that we have managed to model since we obtained the since we've obtained the figures, the agriculturally linked consumers are by far the worst off. If we combine the winter and summer tariffs and work out an annualized price increase, then we see for the category 100 to 500 a price increase of 156% to 39% going down. If we take that same group and use power consumption of 1,000 to 1,400, 1,450, it goes down 27.8% to 23%, and it doesn't get much better if you use absurd amounts of electricity. It remains above the 13% benchmark that the city has applied for. Now, the question is why? Why should people attached to a rural network be so heavily penalized for being there? Especially if you look at the atrocious quality of the service that they receive from the municipality. I know, because I've been personally involved in it, and the representative of Tshwane is also aware of that, that the quality of service is so bad that we have 2-3 years ago applied to Nersa to have the City of Tshwane's license suspended and at least for that area, to create an independent area. Nersa has placed the City of Tshwane on terms at the time, and those terms have not been met, and very soon we are going to apply once again to have the licenses suspended, or at least granted to an independent or a different party, because this level of service cannot go ahead. In this context, it makes no sense to pay this kind of rates increases. If you live on a small holding or a small farm on the east of Pretoria, you will have no piped water. You are dependent on electricity to pump water. Pumping water is electricity intensive. You are using probably more electricity than somebody who is living in town, because other municipal services are not being rendered in the area. Because of the distance from the town, you are also probably running more refrigerators and things like that, which makes you more dependent on electricity and the quality of the service. The restructuring is making it very attractive for people living on farms, but it remains expensive to look at their own renewable and embedded energy solutions. I think I will skip these issues, because the main issue is that of the extent of rates increases. The point, Madam Chair, is simply that the extent of the tariff increases is not sustainable on this community. People who live on these farms are from a certain socio-economic grouping. They are not people living in Waterkloof, they do not live in Mooikloof, they do not live in Woodhill, where there's a different socio-economic situation. And it is our request that this tariff increase, as it affects the agricultural areas, must not be granted. It is unsustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Middelbeck. Any clarification, Mr. Scott?
Yeah, maybe just one issue for me. So you're lamenting the quality of service from the city. I just want to understand, are you then suggesting that in making this decision, we should consider the poor quality of service and make a linkage between that and what the city is proposing? Is that the basis of your presentation? That because there's poor quality of service, therefore there's no justification for these increases or the new charges for agricultural customers?
Yes. If that same book that I referred to by the same author previously highlighted as the two key factors in the pricing of a tariff, quality of service and quantity of consumption are your two key determinants for determining what the tariff should be. In this case, quality of service is atrocious. You will find, if you do consult that book, you will find it on exactly the same page as the quote that I gave. It's just a paragraph above. And as long as the service is atrocious, one of the factors on determining the tariff is a total negative.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Middelbeck, for your presentation. I appreciate it. We are going to call upon the City of Tshwane. You only have 5 minutes just to indicate the way forward and maybe touch on to respond just to some of the key issues raised by stakeholders today. If you can be brief, we're not taking the entire team here. You're not. We need to just deal with the key issues and also just the way forward, because some of that information you don't have anyway. So you need to present it to us, and it needs to be considered. Please go ahead. Unless you had some slides, there 1 or 2 slides where you want to show how you're going to respond to the issues.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I just want to indicate that we welcome all the inputs that we have received from everyone. One wish is that, Chairperson, we would have received such input during the month of April, wherein we had published to all the residents of Tshwane, all the stakeholders in terms of the processes. As you can see, Chairperson, we just wanted to highlight, because I think the issue of public participation came through a number of times that we did not consult. And we just wanted to highlight that we've published, we put this on newspapers. There was posters as well in different areas. We also placed these posters in the schools. Chairperson, to indicate that this is a process that we're going to follow in terms of the budget, in terms of the IDP, including the budget. So we've had meetings in Region 1. We had 3 meetings in Region 1, 2 meetings in Region 2, Region 3, Region 4, Region 5, Region 6, and Region 7. So as you can see, for example, Chairperson in Region 7, we called on community in Gangala, and then we also went to Broncos Parade. So we've covered different areas even within regions. Over and above this, Chairperson, we've also called on all the stakeholders, Chairperson, representing all different forums to come to the city, to the Tshwane House. So if people could not reach these particular areas, we've called a meeting where we've indicated to the public. I also just want to indicate, Chairperson, that the tariffs that went out to the public participation already at this point in time did indicate, Chairperson, if I may zoom into the electricity one. At that point in time, Chairperson, you'll recall that we were working on the 13.81%. However, we since revised that to the guidelines that was provided by Nersa. And on this particular one, Chairperson, this is a presentation. I took it exactly as it is. This is some of the presentations that we did at public participation, which then gives an example of what the tariffs for 18-19 financial year was, as well as the new structure. So we did not go out on public participation on the basis that we're increasing the tariff by 13.87. We indicated this is a structure, this is how the new structure is going to be for the 19-20 financial year. So if you look at the next slide, Chairperson, we also give, because we go out to the communities, we also give them an example of how we calculate the tariffs. And this information is also included in the documents that we went to council. There was a gentleman that indicated that it was a 700-page document. The reason why it's 700-page document, Chairperson, is because we've got different tariffs there. We've got water, refuse, cemetery, all sorts of tariffs. But Annex Check D specifically dealt with tariffs for electricity, and the same, and it included all the changes there. 18-19, this is how the tariffs was, and in the 19-20, this is how the tariffs was. Okay. So, Chairperson, I just wanted to put that forward to say that from the city side, we've opened this part with consultation for the whole month of April. In fact, we would have even welcomed this kind of inputs even in...
Okay, I think I must cut it here. We get the sense here, but you must also appreciate, just like us, Nersa, where we are criticized by stakeholders, it's not because they give you a negative criticism. They want you to pay particular attention in the way that you do things. I hear what you say you have included. one of the challenges of stakeholders is going through a huge document that about 700 pages, and they say that there was complex financial information. So you must understand also people, and I don't think that even in some of the areas you went to Kangala, everybody will understand what's going on. So the issue here is the quality of the consultation and how meaningful the consultation is. So that's number one. And I think if you can take that into account and when you bring that information within 7 days. The other point that was stated here is for the city to provide details of who attended those in the attendance register. That's what we've said already in the previous one. So it is important so that those that are here today, it may be that they were not there, and some of them actually said, don't just use newspapers. Also, because we've got the contact details of these people, you can even send emails. We all do that because people always complain. Even from our side as Nersa, we have the database, we send emails after we published. So there's that aspect as well, and I hope that you are noting, because we would want to see those things before we take a decision. That information, we need it, and I hope that I don't have to repeat it again as I'm spelling it out now on the record. We'll consult our record. And then one of the other things that were mentioned is your engagement with industrial customers, that they stated clearly that there was no sufficient engagement with industrial customers where they would have seen these things and comment on them. Some of the presenters also said that we tried to conduct the municipality, but we only managed to speak to the MMC of finance, not for who then referred them to the one for energy. So there's all of those things in which your response now is not going to be able to provide the adequate information on these things that I mentioned. So if you can provide that information within 7 days, the one that I've just mentioned. And in addition, on this very same point on consultation, where they say that you didn't consult, it is also because it was also stated by the councillor here from FFP to say that there is you didn't provide information. It's one thing to show the outcomes, but you are not showing how you got to that outcome, the calculation and the reasons. So still, it doesn't take away the point. I just want to clarify that part. But you can move on to the next point apart from the consultations. The consultation, I've just indicated what is missing that you must note, and then you can move to the next point.
Okay, Chairperson, it's noted. So, Chairperson, I just wanted to indicate that we do appreciate the comments. The only difference is that we wish it would have been, these issues would have been raised 2 months ago when there was a platform. However, Chairperson, in terms of the way forward, we've noted everything, and we've also noted the fact that we need to supply the regulator with the necessary information. From our side, Chairperson, we are not going to commit, and I mean, we've looked at the recommendation, the alternative for every presentation. We will then go back to our principals as well as political heads, have a discussion with them to present as to this is what each and every organization highlighted in terms of their concerns, and then we will come back to that. Chairperson, I don't know if we need to go back into the technical details of the issues that were raised at this point. Then
I don't think so. You are not rehashing your presentation. It was just the 5 minutes so that you can respond to the key issues and also indicate to this audience how you are going to take some of these key issues. And on some of them, you don't have the mandate anyway, so you will probably want to engage with your principals so that at least you can respond to Nersa. The time that you have is only 7 days before Nersa takes its final decision, taking into account all the views that were presented today in respect of this application.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Sis.
Just for clarity, there was a question that has been ranging around the losses, that our losses are 20-something. It's a myth. Our non-technical losses as at March this year was at 12.27%. Then if you add your technical losses at 7%, that's where we arrive at almost 19%.
You can provide that information to Nersa because you're not responding to that person, you're telling Nersa, so it's important to table the facts before Nersa. So we'll appreciate that. All right. All right, thank you very much, City of Tshwane, for the response, and we look forward to that information, and I'm hoping that you have taken notes during the course of today's proceedings so that you make sure that your responses are adequate and really try to deal with the concern. Don't only look into the issues from your viewpoint, because that is not going to be helpful. Look at them from the view of stakeholders as well, trying to make the regulator as well understand where we come from, and make sure that all the issues regarding the concerns around compliance with the policy, regulations, and the Electricity Regulations Act are taken into consideration. We look forward to then receiving that additional information from you, and also that you will respond to some of the concerns in writing, and that information must reach us within 7 days. Members of the public, I would like to thank all the presenters that took the time to be here today. And I appreciated the contribution and the robust engagement and the suggestions. I think the presentations were all good that were made here today, with all the suggestions that Nersa needs to take into consideration. We appreciate that, and we'll look carefully at those suggestions. And I appreciate the fact that you stayed until this time of the day. And we will then advise as to when we will be able to take the decision, and we can't then give a date today, but it will be communicated to stakeholders as to when we expect to have a final decision on this matter. Thank you very much. This public hearing is adjourned. Thank you.